I'm Teresa Caraggio, and this is Third Paradigm. Today I'm looking at Ukraine, the hegemon's last stand. Hegemon, of course, is the Jamaican plural for hegeman. I'm going to look at what's happening in Ukraine that we're not hearing about right now, where all that is leading, how it's affecting other countries in the world, and then what we need to be doing as communities in preparation for where this is going. Let's do this. I've had this title in my Substack drafts for a couple of weeks, and then I listened to an interview that Cynthia Chung did with Manila Chan and Jamarl Thomas on Sputnik Radio's Faultlines, and it was an episode on May 20th that was called Zielinski Stifles Peace Talks and Sends Troops to Certain Death. In that, there was 2 times that Jamarl said, Ukraine, is it the hegemon's last stand? And I had such pleasure in listening to the 2 of them speak the truth like it was nothing, like it was just what we all understood to be true. And they talked about a number of topics. It was a 3-hour episode, and I stayed up until after midnight, even though I was listening to a recording, just for the sheer joy of hearing the truth spoken as if we all know this is true. There's something about the validation of radio that I think is so essential. When we take back our communities, one of the first things we need to take back are the airwaves, because radio is community forming. I started Third Paradigm a dozen years ago on a pirate station here in Santa Cruz, and there's something about the fact that everyone is listening to the same thing at the same time that creates a bond. It creates a common reality that then people can talk about. So I think that's something we need, and I recommend that everyone check out that show just for your own joy. As I'm listening to Jamarl and Manila be like talking to myself, except funnier and quicker, I hear them talking about how way back in May 20th, Donbass had already been recovered by Russia, that 1,700 Ukrainian troops had surrendered, although they never used that word in the Western media, of course. Jamarl was appalled, as I was, to find out that Zielinski knew that NATO would never accept Ukraine, that was off the table, but in public it was going to continue. So, as he says, this could have been over in 12 hours. Zielinski could have said, oh, you're right, we're never going to be part of NATO, and here are the neo-Nazis who killed 14,000 ethnic Russians. Now that Putin has accomplished what he intervened for, which is protecting the Donbass region, what is Zielinski's strategy? According to Jamarl, it's to sacrifice every Ukrainian in order to buy some time to get them trained on the Western weapons. Putin could leave tomorrow if it wasn't for all of the weapons that are pouring into Ukraine. In the meantime, Manila Chan quotes Rand Paul in saying that the U.S. has to borrow from China that $40 billion to give to Ukraine. We don't have the money. So I think that may mean that what we don't have the money for is to replace those weapons with our military contractors. And I'm not sure that that's a terrible thing. Meanwhile, Russia is definitively winning the energy war. They've cut off oil and gas supplies to Poland and another country for not paying in rubles, which of course means that they would be paying in gold in order to buy rubles. They also are looking at adding more countries to their Eurasian partnership between China and Russia, and their top pick is Venezuela. Now, Caitlin Johnstone has an article out on how you can understand U.S. foreign policy by looking at proven oil reserves. If you look at a chart, at the current rate of production, Venezuela has over 1,500 years of proven oil reserves. The next up is Libya with over 300 years, and then Iran with over 200. At the current rate of production, the U.S. would have 11. That, of course, explains why Biden has gone begging to Saudi Arabia, who has still 70-some years left. But we're still better than Europe, which has none. And that may be why they have just passed with the European Parliament to ban all internal combustion engines starting in 2035. At the same time, the Summit of the Americas is becoming an embarrassment. The U.S. has banned Cuba, Venezuela, and Nicaragua from attending, and a lot of other countries are saying, why bother? At the same time, activists are holding a People's Summit for Democracy, and that's getting much better attention. Now, I learned this from Cuban radio, from Dan Roberts' shortwave radio report, which is an excellent roundup of English-speaking broadcast from all around the world, and I highly recommend that. For Jamarl and Manila, these are not well thought out, well executed plans for global hegemony. This is the hegemon's last stand. These are desperate measures that are backfiring badly. And so, where does that leave the rest of us, which means Europe and what Matt and Cynthia call the Five Eyes, or the Crown Colonies, the UK, and then the US, Canada, New Zealand, and Australia. We're the ones who are going to be left out in the cold when all of this comes down. And people, we need a strategy. I think the time is coming when we can have whatever we want if we know what that is. Right now, the only job in town, any town, is making the rich richer. Essentially, money is a means of organizing labor in the interest of whoever creates it. Because the bankers create it, and then they flip it from one hand to the other, where they're corporate venture capital firms, then all of our jobs have one purpose only, which is to exacerbate inequality. There's no mystery to why inequality is exponential these days. That's because that's the only thing that our labor does. We've got to change that. And when we change it, I think it's by creating microcurrencies so that our labor is serving the community and that money is backed by local housing. The importance of a microcurrency, rather than doing this on a national level, is that you don't want to take on that inequality and you don't want to take on the debt. So in the U.S., you're going to have all these dollars floating around that can't buy anything other than your homes. So with a microcurrency, you can make it where your people have a 2-to-1 advantage on buying local housing and local property. You also can do a 50% tax to turn things back into dollars so that your local producers have a 2-to-1 advantage over a product made in China. And how do I envision us spending our time once we own our own lives again? I think food production is going to be a big factor. I see us spending 3 days a week, maybe, out in the fields, learning animal husbandry, being trained by people who really know what they're doing. And at the same time, listening to radio and being educated about the history, the global events, the anthropology that we never knew because it's been kept from us. So education and manual labor, I think, are hand in hand. I also see us doing things in trade for each other, backed by a currency which is given to us in order for us to use it, for things like well care, for us helping to take care of children, of elders, do things like chiropractic, homeopathy, things that make us feel better, and also fixing up houses. I think it's really important that we are passing these properties on to the next generation in a better form. And I think that education and teaching each other the things that we know is something that is just a joy that we should be sharing. As was written in The Art of War, when your enemy is making mistakes, step back and let them. This house of cards is falling, and when we know how we want to put the pieces back together, the opportunity will be there. And if you'd like to get ready for that, here's an episode on Build a New Model, and here is a playlist on reclaiming local sovereignty. Check out Substack, where all the links to things that I've mentioned will be, and thank you for watching.